All right, let's see. I want to see where people are from. Oh yeah, sorry, I made that request before we had the ability. Attendees, while we wait for more people to file in and get comfortable, tell me where you're from and what your roles are. I know I remember on the last session, we had quite a few people from Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm from. So it was really cool to see that. Okay, look at that. We got someone in Kansas City, Missouri, data scientist, Montreal, a data engineer, welcome. Southwest Ohio, analytics manager, a lot of engineers. An individual from Seattle, hello Seattle, VP of analytics at a stealth financial tech company. Cool, we got people all over the place. All right, our first international person, somewhere in the Netherlands. Yeah, Utrecht, Netherlands, if I'm saying that right. And then someone chiming in from Mexico. You know, we have a really good number of people in the session, so I think everyone's getting comfortable. I wanted to welcome Guli Zhu, who's the Senior Director of Marketing Analytics at Peloton, who's going to talk about organizational design. Guli, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Jason, and hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. Thanks for having me. And yeah, today I'll talk about organizational design. And I know it's not a traditional topic really at analytics and engineering conferences, but I think it's actually a really important topic because getting it right is so critical for success of data teams. So with that, before we kind of go into a lot of the meat of the presentation, I'll give you all a little bit of a quick overview of Peloton. Let's see here. And so in case I'm sure many of you have heard of us, but if not, we're the leader in the connected fitness space. We have 5 products right now, and of those, our original bike is going to be the most famous. And so between those 5 products, we're in 4 different countries, and we actually serve 3 million members who are actively working out on our platform. And those 3 million members do an amazing amount of workouts, actually 164 million workouts over the past year. And so when you divide that, that's about 450,000 workouts a day, which is a really incredible statistic. And as you think about and I love numbers, and one of the things that I love about the company is just to look at the year-over-year growth trajectory. We've seen 100% year-over-year revenue growth each year for the last 6 years, which is really amazing. And it's always exciting to be part of a growth company, but also that always presents its own unique challenges. And so when you think about growth and you talk to folks about it, you talk to your mom or your dad, they think this is what it's like to be at a growth company, right? Because this is what they see on TechCrunch. But in reality, when you're kind of in it, and I've been deep in this, right? And you're burning the midnight oil, you're just like this cat, just working and fighting fires. And, it's fun, and you can, honestly, you love the work that you're doing, but it can just get exhausting, especially if, this never stops. And so as you kind of think about, well, I'm doing all this work, I'm spending so much time and energy, one of the key things you got to think about is it the right work? And so here I'll open up to the poll and kind of ask the audience, number one, what is your day-to-day comprised of? And number 2, which is, do you feel like you have a good understanding of how your work helps achieve broader business objectives?
Hey, Guli, it's Jason again. So for everyone who wants to participate in the poll, please do go back to Pathable where the chat is, and there's a tab on there called polls, and we would love to have you answer the 2 questions, right, Guli? Having them answer both questions? Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Got some stats coming in. Looks like 65% say usually ad hoc requests versus long-term projects. And then for the second poll, 70% of people say yes, 73%.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think, the 35% of people, I think, who are doing usually long-term projects, that's great, and you're 100% on the right track. And for the folks that do ad hoc work, that ad hoc work is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's really important. But what you also want to have is, right, how does that ad hoc work, those then translate into helping the company achieve the broader business objectives? And where you don't want to be is kind of like this person on the slide, right? They're under a mountain of JIRA tickets. And if you are doing a lot of work and you're doing ad hoc work and you don't understand how that ladders in, then that's just going to be demotivating. And so at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, well, again, let's ladder this back to, is it the right work? And if you're not sure, or the answer is no, then maybe there's a bigger picture change that you and the team should be thinking about. And so at that point in time, one of the highest ROI things that you can possibly do is going to be organizational design. And this is, in the end, the goal for this is to set your team up for long-term success. And so when you kind of apply this to data teams, there's usually like two ways of thinking about it, right? You have a centralized data team that supports multiple functions and businesses, or you can be a decentralized analytics team that's embedded within the underlying business. And so I'll talk a little bit about the general pros and cons of each, and then also go into how do you find the right balance. So for centralized orgs, I imagine like the majority of people here are part of centralized orgs. This is the traditional structure. And you all are very familiar with the benefits, right? You have data standardization, revenue means revenue no matter where you sit in the company. You're all using, the whole company is using the same set of platforms. You can have one analyst or engineer support multiple business teams. And if the centralized organization is big enough, that's when you can start to develop specializations around data scientists versus analysts versus engineers, and that provides that kind of career trajectory and functional knowledge. But on the flip side, I imagine you have all seen or felt certain pain points, right? Because I've definitely felt them and seen them in action before, where if you're part of a centralized team, one of the biggest challenges is competing priorities, right? Everybody that's asking work of you they're saying it's the most important work and it has to get done tomorrow, and there's no way for you to kind of figure out what is actually the most important. And so the CFO might come to you and say, hey, I need you to do this because I need to close the books tomorrow. And then right after that, the marketing team says, hey, I need you to drop everything because we're trying to spend $10 million tomorrow and we need this data from you to be able to figure out how to spend that. And so as you kind of like navigate this, one of the things that a lot of centralized teams will do, you start putting process, right? But if you put in too much process, what that leads to is a separation from the business, where business teams are less likely to give you requests because they just have to jump through bigger hoops. And then you as a data team, you're going to be less involved in their day-to-day, and so you can't actually do the best work possible for them. And then you start to get into this vicious circle where they then request like work from you, then you can't do as good of a job, and that ends up leading people to feel like they're service center. And I can imagine a lot of folks have definitely felt that at some point in their careers. And one of the biggest drivers of feeling like a service center is that they don't necessarily have the business context to help solve problems. And so, I'll talk a little about hypothetical, two analysts, but this is hypothetical, but it's also just driven off of a lot of the experiences I've had and I've observed in the companies that I've worked at, where a typical kind of ask from the business side for analysts, right, is, hey, can you help me pull some ad hoc data? Can you tell me, in this case, how many sales came from Facebook? And then you go ahead, you write a query, you pull up a dashboard, you give them an answer, they say thank you, the ticket gets closed, and you never hear from them again on what the next step is. If you can layer on business context, though, you can actually change the paradigm here, right? Where the analyst might actually ask a simple question, like, sure, I can pull the data for you, but like, what do you need it for? And then the business kind of explains what they need it for. And then the analyst can marry their context and their knowledge with the underlying request that came in and actually deliver a much more thoughtful answer than they otherwise would have done just by literally interpreting what was on the JIRA ticket. And this is what enables analytics teams to have really strong partnerships with the business side versus them feeling like, hey, we're just a service center. And so I know a lot of folks on the conference day, you'll probably be BI or data engineers. You might ask, well, of course, analysts need to be close to the business. That's totally normal, and that's expected. But what about us? Because we work on back-end work, and why is business context important to our work? And so I'll kind of go into a second hypothetical here, again, just driven by a lot of what I've seen in my career, which is a very common ask is the business team comes to you and just asks you to update some infrastructure, right? They might say, hey, we're launching a new product next quarter. Can you just make sure sales reporting is going to be in place? They file a ticket. The engineer looks at it, says, sure, I'll go do it. And then off you go. But when you start to layer in business context, this is, again, where you can start to change the equation, where the engineer, rather than just doing the ticket, if they understand the business context, they're going to actually say, you know what, I can do that for you. That's not a problem. But I think you're missing a couple other pieces, right? You may not have thought about that, the fact that you also need to rework all of your KPIs. We have to update our data feeds to our partners. And actually, you probably want to break out the sales data in a different way than you originally thought. And this is where, the business is going to really appreciate that, because they didn't know to think about all these things. And if you think about one of the key benefits here of having that business context is you can avoid that Jira back and forth. How many of you have been in a case where somebody files a ticket, it takes a week to get prioritized and put into the next sprint, and you start working on it, you have a question, and then you ask the clarifying question, but you're blocked otherwise, and then it takes a week for the business to then respond, and then by the time they respond, you start working on it again, you have another question, you're blocked, you wait again for them to respond to the ticket, and so that just creates a lot of process, and just it's not a pleasant process for anybody involved. And so as a BI engineer or data engineer, if you have the right business context, then you can deliver what the business needs versus what they actually may have just said they wanted, but they didn't really know what they needed. And this is where kind of laddering this back into organizational structure and design, this is the critical part of and a key benefit of a decentralized team, right? You're embedded in the business, you have that business context depth, and as a result, you can also do things a lot faster, and you can also smooth out how things get prioritized. If you have a media team asking you to do one thing and a brand marketing team asking you to do something else, and an email marketing team asking you to do something else, rather than you trying to figure out the prioritization yourself, you can just go to the business leader and say, hey, you know what, I got all these asks. What is the most important to do, by the end of the week? And they can provide that feedback. So then you can just go ahead and focus on execution. Another really critical thing that I'm sure everybody has really encountered one way or the other is just around headcount, right? And how many times have you been a part of a centralized team where it seems like the business is growing way faster than you are, right? They're doubling, tripling their headcount, and you might not get any headcount, and you're the last to find out about it. Or you might get one, but then they also added 20 more people. So that one you got is nowhere near enough to support what the workload is actually going to be. And I've seen this happen over and over. And so as a decentralized team, here's the key benefit, right? If the business says, hey, I have 5 headcount, but I know that I'm not going to be able to do a lot if I can't get the right analytics and engineering support, then they're going to say, you know what? Rather than hiring 5 marketers, I'm just going to hire 3 and give 2 to analytics and engineering, because my whole team is going to be able to do better when they have the right backend and analytics to support those decisions. But as you think about decentralization, there are definitely considerations you need to think about, right? And you need to put in the right guardrails for it to be effective. First, you have to have critical mass. You can't do it with really small teams. You need to have the right turnkey platforms and tools, because you don't have the ability to hire 10 platform engineers to spin up platforms for you. You also have one key thing to be aware of is it's going to be harder to standardize data, right? And what can easily happen if you don't keep a close eye on it is you have 5 decentralized teams, they're all pulling or defining revenue differently, and then one day finance is going to come to you and say, well, why doesn't this number tie to that number? And then now all the teams are off on a wild goose chase on trying to reconcile the numbers, and that's kind of just a waste of everyone's time. And then the last and most important consideration is going to be around operational silos, right? You're so focused on delivering results for the business and doing what they need that it's easy to develop this tunnel vision where you're just focused on that, and it's harder to think holistically about, hey, you know what, I'm solving this problem for them. Well, what can I do to expand that and help other teams, or just expand that and help the whole company? So when you think about like centralization versus decentralization, I've seen it evolve from one direction to the other and back to the other. And so I'll kind of give a few guiding principles around how you can then apply it and how you can think about it in your own data organizations. So the first guiding principle is really around, it's not an either or. It's not that you can only be centralized or only be decentralized. There's always going to be a gradient, and that's going to be okay. And where that gradient is actually going to change depending on the level of maturity of the company, right? So when you're really early on, you're going to be centralized. And over time, as the business teams grow, it's just very natural for them. And I've seen this again happen over and over where they say, you know what, like, I just want to have control over my own destiny. So I need to hire people to do X, Y, and Z, and they're going to hire analysts and data scientists, and they're going to be able to move faster. But you can do that up to a certain point. And if the entire company is decentralized, then you start getting to running to a lot of the issues I talked about where you don't have standardized data definitions and it kind of feels like chaos. And so at that point, the company is naturally going to start to become more centralized. As you think about the evolution of a company, the more you grow, the more likelihood you might go public. And every decision that you make can impact millions of people. And so you need to be very methodical, disciplined, controlled about every single change that you make. And that's where centralized teams definitely make a bigger impact and have the advantage. And as you can see on this curve too here that, depending on where the company is, it's going to change the amount of expected decentralization or centralization. And so what makes sense today that you designed for might be totally out of date in a year or two. And that's not only okay, but it's expected, right? One of my favorite quotes is, change is going to be the only constant at these kinds of companies. And so you kind of have to roll with the punches and just, adapt as the business changes. The third guiding principle is around, designing your organization. Like, let's say you've settled on a rough structure, but you have to start narrowing in on the details. You have to design your organization for the underlying business need, and you have to do that first, and you have to think about people second. And that's a really hard thing to do because anytime you involve people, things become a lot harder, and it sounds easy to do this, but then again, once you involve people, problems will start popping up, right? And so I remember that when I was a first-time manager, my lead asked me to really think about, designing the team, redesigning the team in a certain way. And I remember I struggled with, well, I'm used to so-and-so doing this. They seem like they're doing that well. So like, why am I, rocking the boat, and why am I changing their scope or their role? And you know what, if I do that, then am I going to hurt their feelings because I do care about them, and are they going to be upset? And I want to make sure people are happy, right? And that's a very natural thing. But you have to be able to kind of separate people for a second and just really be objective about, okay, what's going well with the org, what's not going so well, what are the business needs, and then how can you design your team to plug in to address those needs, and then design the roles and responsibilities needed. And once you do that, then you can start slotting people in and say, you know what, the so-and-so is really good at this, let's put them here, or let's put them here. Or maybe now we've actually seen that we don't have the capabilities on the team, and we actually need to go hire someone new to fill that gap. And the last, but I think this is a quite important principle, which is around, impact. And in the end, what you're doing with organizational design is you want to build for impact. You're trying to maximize impact. And if you decompose impact into, an equation and how you measure it, it's really a function of three things. It's the work that you do, multiplied by how fast you do it, multiplied by are people using and adopting it, right? And so if you take a very simple example of, I'm a BI engineer, I built the best dashboard in the entire world, but it took me a year to do it, well, then you're not going to have great impact. Or you can kind of say, well, again, I'm a great BI engineer, I built awesome dashboards and I build them really quickly. But if the folks that end up trying to use it find it too hard to use, it's not what they asked for, they can't operationalize it, then again, you're not going to have big impact. And so as a leader, what you really want to think about is how can I design my team to maximize the combination of each of these three variables to drive the biggest impact on the overall organization. And so the last part I'll get into is just, some tips and tricks around, now that you're starting down this route, like what can I, teach you guys or share with you about my experience and how do you enable success in data teams? And, this is applicable to all data teams, but I think especially to decentralized ones. So the first one is migrate to the cloud. And, we're at a 5Tran conference. It's pretty clear what the advantages of the cloud is. And I'll just share a little bit anecdote with you on, when I was at an older company, we were on-prem data warehouses. And I remember that, we're always stuck in this queue at 9 a.m. in the morning. Everybody's trying to run their jobs. It always takes 2 to 3 hours to run a 5-minute query. And by the time that the platform team buys the servers, installs it, tests it, and launches it, the company has already scaled beyond what the purchased hardware can do. And so you keep running into the situation, right? And so migrating the cloud is going to be really important to be able to move fast. The second part is the decision around build versus buy. And a really great example that pretty much every company has is, you have data needs from Facebook, and people want the spend data and the creative level details and the conversions. And so you could hire an engineer to write the code, right? But what's going to have to happen? You got to hire that person. You have to ramp them up on the business context. They have to look at the design docs for the API. They actually have to then build the code and write the code. They have to QA the code. And then once you start getting results, you have to then QA the results again. And then, so that's going to take a while. And then, they're going to move on to the next project, and then something will inevitably break, right? And then it's going to, they have to get pulled from that project back onto this project. It's going to take them time to fix it. And so you kind of get into this the circle where it's kind of a waste of everybody's time, because also no engineer just wants to fix things, right? They want to build new things. And so this is where companies like Fivetran come in, where I've had such great experience with them, where they can come in and say, you know what, like, rather than you going through all that, we'll pay you a few dollars, and what we'll get back is, turnkey solution where we input our credentials and all of a sudden it shows up in our warehouse, right? And you can save a lot of time with that. And so with that, you should think about the principle, buy if you can and build if you must, if there's no solution out there that works for you, or you just need it to a different standard. And the third part about enabling success is just really around data self-service, especially for non-technical users. It's important to provide the right tools and the right training, but also a key part is evangelizing those tools. I've had numerous times where people come to me and say, hey, Guli, I don't think Looker works for me. It just doesn't do what I need it to do, and I want to buy this other data visualization tool. And then I start asking more questions and I peel the onion back, and I realize that there's no problem with Looker. Looker can do everything they ask for and more. The problem is that either the original implementation of Looker wasn't great, or they just didn't know how to use it and how to cut the data in the ways that they need. And so as a data team, if you can evangelize the right platforms, right, and show them how powerful these platforms can be in helping them answer their business problems and questions, then they're going to start using it, and they're going to depend on you less and less for little small things from day-to-day analytics perspective. And that's when you can combine all these three areas and really spend your time and your team's time working on the most impactful things. And that's what's going to drive growth for the company. So with that, thanks everybody for listening, and I'll turn it back to Jason for questions.
Amazing stuff. Thanks, Guli. Yeah, we've had some questions come in. In terms of data practices, how do you best, I'm reading it verbatim, so give me a second. How do you best fight the battle where there isn't enough cost value analysis being done before starting a potentially high cost project? Like, oh, we need to implement Databricks as a solution, but there's not enough evidence, in my opinion, that there is enough value to warrant the cost, money, people, time.
Yeah, that's definitely something we face a lot. And the biggest thing is, like, you have to sell your end users on the vision of where you want it to go, right? And so it's not just about you saying, hey, I think it's gonna save time and money, and so I'm gonna go do it, right? You have to actually get that buy-in at first and say, hey, here's the problem that you have, and you've been having this problem for the last 1, 2, 3 years, and it hasn't gotten better, even though people told you it would. And so I think we have a solution. And you should kind of share with them, okay, these are all the things that it can do. And then you get their buy-in, and they're going to get really excited about it. And then you can go ahead with a proof of concept, prove it out, show them that it works just like you told them it would. And then this is exactly how you then go get budget, because then people will see the value in it, and you can go ahead and then actually implement and do the actual hard work.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. How do you sell a decentralized team on career progression? Seems easier to be a part of a larger centralized data org.
Yeah, that's a good question, and something that has definitely, I've seen both sides of the coin. And I think in the end, it just depends on the people, and there's no right answer, right? Some people really love structure. They know that they want to be a data scientist, and they're going to want to be data scientist 1 and 2, and senior data scientists, et cetera, right? And so those people, like, it's probably better for them to be in a centralized org. But if you have somebody who's just like, intellectually curious, they can do many different things, and they don't know what they want to do yet, that's when being part of a decentralized org will make a lot more sense. And then inevitably, right, the decentralized team is going to get bigger and bigger, and they're going to be like almost like a little bit of a centralized team within a broader business function. Like for me, marketing analytics. And then you can also then start to build out the specialized capabilities. Okay, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be an analyst, you're going to be a data scientist. So the answer is it depends, and it depends what the people want, and also just depends on what the business needs at that time.
Got it. What leadership role in a traditional non-tech data organization should we look for? What traits are needed to help disrupt legacy systems with minimal disruption in business operations?
Is this a question about relating it back to like a business stakeholders?
Let's assume so. I don't have any more context, sadly.
Okay. Could you repeat the question again?
Oh, customer. Okay. What leadership role in a traditional non-tech data organization should I look for? What traits are needed to help disrupt legacy systems with minimal disruption in business operations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple ways to answer that question. I mean, if you're the one coming in trying to really drive change, right, and help people, then again, like this goes back to you have to sell people on your vision. But in order to do that, you actually might need to prove yourself first. And you can say, hey, here are these small things these problems I've seen come up for you, and we can solve it over the next 3 months. You deliver on that, and they're going to trust you more and more, and you'll take on bigger projects. And then you're going to develop that relationship, and then that's again where you can kind of take out more scope, and then you can drive bigger change over time. And then the other part is also I'm not exactly sure if this answers the question or not, but you also need a good partner. And this is really critical too. You need somebody on the business side that shares your vision for what it's going to be, right? Like you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you are working with people that don't understand why that's important, then you're not going to be able to affect change. And so you have to develop relationships and find that person or people that really share your vision and help them become advocates for you. So then again, you can drive broader change at the company.
Love it. Love it. I'm trying to think. You spoke a little bit about adoption being such a critical success factor for any BI project. What tips or proven methods do you have that can speed or accelerate adoption capability?
Yeah, one of my the favorite things and most important things that you can do here is a roadshow. And it sounds really, really simple, right? The hard part is always implementation or even getting buy-in. But if let's say a leader likes it, but then nobody underneath that person understands it, then you're also just not going to get adoption. And so what's important is you actually say, you know what, like let's do a roadshow. Let's invest the time. I know it's not the most fun thing, the most fun technical project to work on, but it's actually really critical. Where then you go team by team, and you can't even do it in like a really big setting because everybody's gonna have different questions.
Yeah.
And so, hey, marketing team, hey, retention team, hey, finance team. We're talking about this broader system that's going to be implemented for the company. Here's why it matters to you, and let me actually do a mock-up of something of a potential output. And this is the kind of analysis or the kind of data that it unlocks for you to help you solve your problems. And then when you do that roadshow, everybody starts really getting it. And that's when, again, like this is all kind of everything builds on top of each other. And so then people will start talking about it. They're getting excited. They're going to get other people excited. And that's when you can really start to drive adoption.
I have a question for you. What's your favorite type of data project or group within a company to work with? Driving sales, customer success? What gets you excited?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite terms that we use at Peloton is just teams of smart creatives, right? And that doesn't just mean if you're a creative person, working on, design, but you can be an analyst or an engineer and just be really creative as well. And so I love working with, I'll give a shout out to our marketing team, our partnership team. They are so smart and creative in what they do. And for me, it's just so rewarding to work with them, side by side as a partner in helping them solve their toughest problems, whether it's, the reporting is really unstable or it's they need a model built. I think in the end, it's just like the people that you work with, that's what I think really gets you excited, or at least gets me excited to go in every single day.
Agree. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been really great. We've seen some awesome interaction in the chat. So we're going to close out with Guli right now. Right now we have a short 10-minute break. So this is an opportunity if you want to check out some sponsors, go to their booths, download some files, get some gamification points. And then we're going to hear next from Rajan Patel of Fastly about how we can build trusted and tested data marts. So close out of here, take a nice break, go grab a cup of coffee, and then we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Data. It's everywhere. With every click, swipe, view, purchase, and shipment, your business creates data. And all that data can help you run your business better. But how do you analyze it? Some solutions are too complex. Only the data team has access, which forces everyone to wait for answers. And wait, and sometimes they give up and stop asking. Other solutions let everyone do their own analysis, but only with parts of the data, so no one has the big picture. How can you give everyone in your company a consistent and reliable picture of what's happening in your business? You turn to Looker, a data platform that's speedy to deploy and can work on top of any analytic database. Looker makes it simple to describe your data and define business metrics that the entire company can agree and rely on. Once you have a reliable source of truth for your business data, anyone on your team can analyze and explore it, ask and answer their own questions, create visualizations, and drill down to row-level detail. Then everyone can share discoveries with a simple link, and every answer becomes the inspiration to explore more. Looker, a data platform that both data analysts and business teams can rely on.